Let's now look at how we add animations to our videos. So looking at this screen, for example, I see that most of the action is happening up here in the upper left, and so I might want to zoom in to that section. Well, to add these animations, I can click here on Animations, and I see this option to zoom in is called Scale Up. I say, great, so I want to do that, and I'll find the place where I want to do that in my video, and I'll draw it back to about here, and then I'll just grab Scale Up and drag it down here. So now it scales up. And when I do that, I see under the first tab, it says it takes the scale up to 125%. I say, okay, good, but it's not zooming in. I'm missing kind of the top part of this. So what I'll do is I'll just grab this and I'll drag it down. Yeah, maybe something like this, or maybe I want it closer to the center. I'll do this. So if I want to preview this, let me zoom in and I'll bring this to the beginning of my track. And then I'll mute this. I don't need to hear the audio in the background, but let me go ahead and play this. And I can see that it zooms to that section. So these animations are going to help us to add different elements and add motion to what we have. And a common one is that one to zoom in. If I need to, I can scale back down or zoom back out. Or once I've gone through this far enough, I'll just go out a little further. Maybe right here I say, okay, that's enough. And I'll grab and I'll say scale to fit. And I'll drag this down, and then it'll zoom back out. And so I can play that, just a preview. And then it zooms out. Okay? And I'll mute this audio track as well. So that's how we can add these different effects. Now, I personally don't even use scale up, scale down, scale to fit, smart focus, none of these, nor do I use these up here. Instead, what I do is I just add a custom animation each time. So I'll show you here. I'll just remove this last one. And let's say that right here is where I wanted to add that. Well, I can click and I can drag this custom animation down here. And I'll have the option when I click on the clip to make the adjustments. It was at 125%, but after the animation, so I'll move this, make sure it's after the animation, I want it to be down to 100%. So I'll go ahead and type it. Most of the time that'll be the fastest. And it's not in the right position, so I'll move it to where I want. So now if I look before, it's zoomed in. When I look after, it's zoomed out and it's centered. So I will choose the options over here that I want based on whatever I want to do on the screen. So I choose custom. The other way to do this is to use Shift-A to add an animation that way. And so now after this point in the animation, maybe I want to zoom in even further. I want to go to 150%. Now realize anytime you're zooming in, it is going to affect the quality. It's not going to be as crisp. So just don't complain when you zoom in and it doesn't look as good as you expected. So there I changed the scale. I want to bring this and drag this to where I want it to be on the screen. There, maybe that's what I want for the next thing. So I've zoomed out and then I'll play this for a bit and then it'll zoom way in. Now I look at that and I say, well, that went in a little bit faster than I expected. All right, well, let me zoom in on my timeline and slow that down a bit. So I can see here that this duration, if I click on it, I can start to drag this. It was 1 second, but maybe I want it to go and take 2 seconds to go to that point. All right, so I can resize by doing that. So now when I play, it's more of a subtle animation as it zooms in slower. So I can drag the time that it takes. Now it came in by 1 second by default. Remember that Edit and Preferences, or Control and the comma, will allow us to change the timing on that to make that animation longer or shorter by default. Now I'll leave it at 1 second. I like that. Another thing that we can see here when we add these animations, I'm going to right-click this animation, and it has this easing. I don't know if you noticed or not, but what it did was it didn't just zoom in like a perfect zoom. There was some gradual zoom at the beginning and gradual at the end. So if I go through this, it moves in a little bit, and then a lot, and then it slows down again at the end and does a little. And so there's this auto easing that it does. And that's great. If you wanted it to be very straightforward, you just wanted it to move in a perfect pattern, then go ahead and choose linear. And then that way, it just moves in at the same rate for every frame. It just moves in a little bit, little bit, little bit each way until it's all the way zoomed in. So when you right-click these, you have the option to change the easing, which just means how it's happening on your screen. For those of you who worked in Camtasia 8, you may remember that the hotkey for adding animations and keyframes was the Z key. If you want to change this hotkey back to what you had in Camtasia Studio 8, you can go up to Edit and down to Preferences, and then the Hotkeys tab. Click inside the field for the Add Animation, which currently says Shift-A, and then press the Z key on your keyboard. And click the OK button in the lower right. Because I teach Camtasia, I'm going to keep the hotkeys with their defaults.